You're now watching two old farts making noises.
Do you want to know why some businesses succeed and some businesses fail? Why some businesses grow and some businesses don't? That's what this show is all about. Business, business, business.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Lost Dollar Business Club. We have our special guest, Mike Collins, back online talking about globalization, the famed author of Dismantling of America. And now we'll be talking about the weakening of globalization in America, that there are plenty of positive signs that are actually in the works. And Michael's going to tell us all about it.
Okay, let me start off with my opening statement in my article. The high priests of globalization and free trade claimed it would benefit everyone by raising output and productivity, creating more jobs, raising wages, and lowering prices of products in the world economy. America became the freest of all free trade countries and open our markets to our trading partners, but we got steamrolled by globalization.
Steamrolled. That's right. I mean, and we talked about that on a couple of our shows, a couple of the previous episodes about how the ills of globalization and free trade has actually been, it's put the United States on an unfair playing field. And it's, of course, deindustrialized the country to very negative effects for certainly the middle class, but obviously the entire strength of the country.
Yes, just as a couple of items in the steamrolling, we ended up with a $1 trillion annual trade deficit. We lost 5 million manufacturing jobs, 90,000 factories. David Autor, the economist, said that out of 722 regions, 1/3 of all the regions had suffered from declines in income. That means that 1/3 of the U.S. public reduced their income. And it also there's a rebellion now by all the people in the middle class that got left behind. But as you said, I think America has woken up to the fact that we lost the game, and the change is coming.
All right, and that's what we're focusing on today. Does John or Mr. K have anything to add before we get into some of the positive aspects of what's happening today?
So you think
I'll let John roll.
John's going to say something positive. I'm glad I'm sitting down.
well,
what do you got, John?
How are we gonna get back the skills that we've lost in these last 20 years? That's a sort of my question. Because to bring all those, if we want to bring back these jobs now require maybe even greater skills than before, and it's going to be a challenge, I think. But I'm looking forward to seeing if companies will train people to do that. There's going to have to be an incentive by the government.
That's a whole nother subject because it's a big problem, and I was hoping to address that in a separate time, but it is a big problem, and we've lost not only many of the skilled people, and right now, as things are changing with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act and the CHIPS Act, we need skilled people, but we really don't have them right now. And the training has not happened. And this largely, I put this at the feet of the multinationals because they quit investing in any kind of training programs that required thousands of hours like journeyman machinists. They haven't done it. They're not doing it today. So it's a big problem for reshoring. And I guess I would like to get into that later on.
Sure.
It feels like America fell asleep at the wheel many years ago when, everybody got a little bit handsy, shall we say, with the big dollars and weren't thinking about all the small dollars. And of course, with that went inflation, and everybody needs, 5 cars, and therefore, they're not aiming at the machinist job. They weren't aiming at all the things that are kind of basic. And all the countries that are, quote unquote, from the globalized world, they were focused on that because they didn't have anything else. So they filled all those gaps in. And of course, you get some big multinationals going, yeah, we'll take some of that because it's nice and cheap. Now you need it.
Absolutely, we need it. It's a really big problem, but I think I'd like to set it off for another time.
Yeah, because there are a lot of I think you're absolutely right. The fact that we're even talking about this means that in the common parlance, people are waking up to this, and I mean, people feel it in their pocketbooks, in their wallets, and then communities feel it too, all across the nation. I live in a rural area, and I certainly know manufacturing has left a lot of that area. Farming has left a lot of that area, and people are feeling it. So you're saying now, Mike, there actually are some good signs that are coming out of this where our leaders are waking up to it and actually changing policies and changing the ways that they act, not just at the political level, but also in the private sector.
Well, and I think it begins with the problems that China now has that are causing this. Their economy has slowed. They're about half of the GDP growth that they were in the glory days. They have $11 trillion in corporate debt. Their biggest real estate firm just filed for bankruptcy on
last week,
$28 billion. So, and companies are beginning to leave China. So that's driving it a lot. And many of the companies are reshoring back to the United States, but they're also nearshoring to countries like Mexico. So it's good. There's a lot of efforts now in the Congress to try to halt many of China's mercantilist strategies. One of them that there's working on as I speak is to delist and deregister all the companies that are closely associated with the Chinese Communist Party and the military. And that's going on. So there's a lot of good.
Tell us a little bit about the delisting and taking them off the trades, because the exchanges, because that's a very big move to be proposing, and that's actually happening.
It is. It's one part of of a lot of stuff they're doing about Chinese companies, but people don't know that about 5,000 Chinese companies are into the average person's mutual funds. And in fact, one of the big examples is the retirement pension program for the military and federal workers heavily depends on Chinese companies for their pension returns. That is all being debated, and there was a law, I can't recall it, but it was a law to try to delist companies that were associated with China's military, the Chinese Communist Party, or the Uyghur problem. Mm-hmm. And the deadline for it is the early 2024. But they're after him. And if they can start delisting some of the people who were on the blacklist, China's decline may accelerate.
Are we hoping, or I should say, are you hoping, I know John is, so I don't ask because he only likes Chinese restaurants, but are you hoping then for China's decline and they go back to an isolationist type company or country, or are you just hoping that America then pulls itself up and goes back to where we were in the 20s and the 30s, where we produced everything and didn't depend on anybody?
Well, it begins with starting a real decoupling from China. That doesn't mean that everybody has to pull out and they're the enemy, but it means the beginnings of trying to stop their mercantilist strategies and to slowly pull away from them. And I think that's what's happening now.
Right.
And Wall Street knows it now. Wall Street has been the biggest benefiter of Chinese stuff, but they see that the handwriting is on the wall. Let me quote from Larry Fink, who's the chairman of BlackRock Financial, the biggest of the financial firms. He said, supply chain disruption caused by the pandemic and Russian invasions of Ukraine has put an end to globalization we have experienced over the last 3 decades. Another guy, Howard Marks, who from Oak Tree Capital, said the negative aspects of globalization have now caused the pendulum to swing back towards local sourcing. Outsourcing, he said, led to the elimination of millions of jobs and the hollowing out of manufacturing regions and the middle class of our country. So they both see what's coming at them. And I think that those are really positive signs to hear the titans of Wall Street, decry the globalization. It doesn't mean it's ending, but it's certainly weakening.
So
I don't know. I think that there's a great opportunity on both sides of your borders, north in Canada and in Mexico. You've got supply chains, which should be a lot shorter. You've got huge, land mass on which to build, the infrastructure for a lot of manufacturing. I see this as an investment opportunity close to home. Why don't we just focus on working closer together? We all know each other's rules
and follow them.
Yeah.
But based on what you just said, so with globalization, not that I put a lot of faith in what Wall Street has to say, because we're the oldest profession. So let's not kid anybody. We'll just find a new way to screw everybody. But my question is then, with the BRIC countries coming into play, I think you're still going to have globalization. They're just going to swing it other ways. Even though we're bringing things back to America, a lot of American companies now are in the Philippines and India. So it's like, okay, we're leaving China. We don't like you this week, but we're going somewhere else. So do we think we're really going to get back to that? I mean, I know it'll make it better, but are we really going to get back to that? Or are we just basically going somewhere else less painful right now?
I think it is going to somewhere else that's less painful than nearshoring, as you spoke, is happening in Canada, Mexico, and even in Central America, but it's slow. Let me throw something out to you guys. My friend Clyde Prestowitz has a comment. He says, none of the relatively wealthy companies got rich from free trade, and that is countries like Germany and Japan. They all got rich by practicing mercantilism. And the U.S. is the only country that played by the rules, and we got steamrolled. So it suggests that if we want to really play in this game, even if it's slow, do we need to practice some of the mercantilism strategies that all of our competitors use, such as manipulating their currency to keep the dollar high? Should we mount a reciprocity strategy to equal them in tariffs and value-added taxes? How will we play the game? What do you think?
Well, look, the problem with tariffs, they're great, but who ends up paying for them? When Trump put the tariffs on China, it looked great, but it's the U.S. consumer that paid those tariffs. The Chinese didn't pay them. They just said, okay, the price is 10, now it's 15, because of the tariffs. You guys want to buy? Yeah, sure, we want to buy because we need to, but nobody else. So that's the problem with tariffs. Uh, it doesn't really hurt uh, the offending party that you want to penalize, unless you have another place where you can source the goods. But we were talking about this offline before, was that, for instance, the not the inflation, well, the infrastructure act that went through, that has all these subsidies for renewable energy. Well, 80% of all the components for solar panelings come from China. So if we're, in a way, we're helping the Chinese. We're giving them the money, for all this stuff, instead of we can't produce it at home because we just don't, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the plants, we don't have anything. So it's a very tricky sort of business, and on how we can switch from sourcing stuff from China and try and benefit and do it at home. So it's going to take it's a decades process, and the usual political solution is somewhat blunt and difficult, and doesn't always achieve the goal that the politicians try and push. So it's, as you say, it's it's going to take a while. Not everything is going to come back to the U.S. because it's just can't compete from a cost basis when there's a lot of labor input and skills and all that. So,
And a lot you don't want.
right, yeah, we don't want the dirty stuff back.
Exactly.
Yeah, so,
and dirt pays.
Yeah, and dirt pays. Yes.
Well, let me say this about tariffs in China. The only strategy that we have used that has done anything to stop China from cheating are tariffs. And I look at it more from the practical point of loss of industries and technologies. We've been through technology transfer agreements and joint ventures. We've been giving the Chinese the technologies they need for their 2025 plan. We've been losing industries. I keep tabs through the Department of Labor since 2001. Every year I update 38 industries in terms of how many, what the employment is and what the number of factories are. They have been all, up until this year, they've all been declining. We've been losing factories, and hence we lose industries. The only thing that we've employed that has been able to reduce it or stop it are the tariffs. There doesn't seem to be any other way to stop it. So from the point of view of if you think that maintaining our industries, and much less growing them, and stopping them from getting the technologies that we invent, then I other than tariffs, I guess I question what else can you do to stop this, because it continues to go on.
And there's a longer term view as well that, well, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's comment? And you quoted in April of 2023, just of this year, talking about this new American economic doctrine, because
Jake, I think Jake Sullivan's speech, he's the National Security Advisor to Biden. His speech was really critical, and I think he was set up to deliver it to show where the Biden administration is trying to just in a sentence, he says the new strategy that they have will build a fairer, more durable global economic order for the benefit of ourselves and our people. Between he and the uh, and the trade representative Ty, they both have made speeches talking about, and I think when you really read through them, they're really talking about getting out of China and playing the game differently.
Right. And that's so in terms of playing the game differently, isn't one of the efforts that's happening is reinvesting in American skills and American education and getting upskilling existing employees, as well as investing in research, basic research and development. Do you see some of that also happening?
I see very little of it happening. It's really what's needed, but there are spots around the country where you could say they've changed the education but when it gets right down to it, for the kind of skills that are needed to reshore production for technical products, you need apprentice type training, and apprentice training is not, go to the community college for a couple of courses. It's training that is hands-on, and it's thousands of hours, not hundreds. And that's what we've avoided. Now, what the multinationals did to avoid this is they did several things. One was they started to buy services from the Asians. So they get machining and tool and die and all kinds of things from overseas. They have stonewalled the apprentice thing. They did an internal, the Manufacturing Institute did a survey of their all their members, which are mainly the multinationals, a recent one, and it showed that on the average they did 42 hours of training a year. Wow. 42 hours of training is nothing, and that is not going to help. So they're still stonewalling this. They don't want to make the investment. Some of the smaller and mid-sized companies are doing a pretty good job of this, but we've lost what Willie Shee and Gary Pisano we've lost the industrial commons, the skills and the know-how and the people and so on, and we've got to rebuild it back. It's a big problem, and how fast we can reshore products and so on is going to be determined. So at the beginning of this session, the comment about training is very strategic. And so far, I don't see any massive movement to change education or training in any big way.
Well, back when we all went to school, I'm assuming we're all roughly the same age, except Michael, he's only 14. But when we all went to school, they had vocational training. So if you didn't want to go to university or 2-year, peanut butter and jelly type college, right? You could go become an auto mechanic. You could become an electrician. Like they started to train you, if you will, your junior year in high school. So you had this 2-year program. So when you graduated, you could go and work for whatever union as an apprentice, but you already had the skills behind you. So to Michael's point, for us to do this, it has to start at the local level. It has to say, the high schools have to say, okay, we need to do X, so we need to put these programs back in. And then the industrial complex, if you will, needs to say, okay, we're going to take the kids from the school and stop shipping everything out. So, there's a lot of, it's all great, but if you can't get everybody on the same page in the same book, it's going to be very difficult. And it seems like everybody's on a page, but they're all in different books.
And also, there was a time when, those kind of skills, whether it was nursing, teaching, whatever, it was made to sound a bit sexy. You know what I mean? And now they've almost made it sound like something you should run away from. And trying to tell that to somebody who's 16, 17, 18 years old before they get into the workforce, that it's sexy again. Yeah, it's going to take a while. It's not something you're going to turn around really quickly.
Yeah, but at least targeting that age group sounds like something that maybe someone listening to this show will be inspired to take this up.
Yeah.
But it is important.
Absolutely.
Well, a CEO or a COO of a company is literally going to have to be like, okay, we need skilled workers, let's say 5 years from now. They
Right.
need then to go to, if you will, if you're head of the union for the plumbers or the electricians or whatever, you almost need to then go to your local high school and say, we want to do a vocational training with you.
Well, and start with the seed of one thing that I think we can do is start with the seed of innovation that young people
Right.
are already getting in. There are some young people who are already getting into 3D printing and robotics, and they're experts and they're very young. And so the seeds of innovation, I think, are still there. I think
Right.
if we invest in those kinds of activities, those kinds of competitions, and make it attractive again, that sounds
Well,
like the
if you
effort.
think of the billions that companies actually spend going into schools and universities, colleges, on young people to throw a ball into a hoop or run it across the field, yeah, it stands to reason that they could invest similarly in bolstering knowledge.
But here's the problem with that. If I'm a booster, and I'm not a booster of any university or whatever, because I think it's a waste of money. If I'm a booster, I don't really care that you produce the best aeronautical engineer, the best car mechanic, the best this, right? I care that you give me a Heisman Trophy winner, get me to the Final Four, and that's what I care about, right? So
Yeah.
the priorities of our country need to change as well, and that's why I said I like the book we're reading. The problem is that everybody is reading a book and they're all on different pages, but it's not even the same book. And I think that's what the CEOs and COOs of the companies and even the educators have to come together and go, listen, to do this, we need to do this. And everyone's so much chasing the dollar that I don't know if that's going to happen. It's great that we're doing some of it, but I don't know that like to really bring back to where we need to be if it's going to happen because of
It's
that.
not just it's we keep saying it's going back, and I think it's I don't think there is a going back. I
Right.
think of it as we need to evolve into the future where America is stronger, where we realign our priorities. And Mike, you mentioned this author or this financial analyst Rana Foroohar, and you mentioned alternatives to laissez-faire globalism that are gaining influential followers. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Well, Rona for Farrar, however you let me go back and say something about the training thing before we jump to
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
My speculation is this: I think that the multinationals who have the money to make the biggest investment and make a difference in training have stonewalled. And I think what they're waiting for and what they're pushing is for the government to do it, or at least to subsidize a lot of it. And I think that's what they're holding back to do. And I think that may be the real solution to it, to do it for the whole country, you know.
Right.
Right.
And
That's
I
it.
personally, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, but the problem is that they're too busy doing stupid stuff. You know, like when they give money for stuff, and it's sort of like that doesn't help anybody. You know, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think Michael was on, but we were talking about when they just did the CHIPS Act, right? And we were joking it's the California Highway Patrol Act, but they were doing the CHIPS Act, and it's 400 million or billion or whatever the ridiculous number is, but it's going to like the top 5 companies. It's not going to startups that have a better process or startups that have a better chip. It's just going to go to their friends. So when you say let's have the government subsidize it, no, businesses have to. Businesses can't wait.
You're saying who's it going to go to? That's a really important point. And the government has already proven to be pretty corrupt on a lot of levels in that regard. Crony capitalism. Nobody here supports that.
And I don't care Democratic or Republic or Whig or this or that. I don't really care who's in. Right. But that's the problem. So to me, if I'm the CEO of a manufacturing plant, I'm not really going to wait for the United States government to do something. If I need people, I'm going to go to the high school. I'm going to go to the junior college, and I'm going to be like, I want to help make this program because I know over the next 10 or 20 years, we're going to need these people. Because if you're going to wait for our government to do it, when we're speaking Mandarin in a few years or whatever language we're speaking, it's not going to work, right? So we have to go back to being resilient.
I don't think Mike is saying wait, not to speak for you.
No,
But
I'm not saying he's saying wait. The CEOs are waiting. No one's doing anything, right? They all sit and wait. It's great. Larry Fink makes a statement. What are you doing about it,
What is he
Larry?
doing about it?
Nothing.
That's
No
right.
one does anything. They all make a statement and they all sit. My point is, if I'm running a manufacturing plant and I know I need employees, I'm not going to sit. I will go to the local high school. I will go to the local
We
community
need more
college and go,
CEOs like that.
right. But
Yeah.
CEOs today don't do anything. They just sit. They're waiting. And it's like enough. Like, and to Michael Collins's point, if we want to be even a halfway great country again, or go back to where we were, everyone's got to get off their whats and actually do something and be productive and think out of the box and say, how do we do this? And all they worry about is how did I do this quarter and what's my bonus? And that is also a problem. So I'm just saying.
Well, back to what the subsidy is. I'm talking
Right.
about the government coming up and developing the apprentice programs for everybody. They're only going to provide the money.
Right.
And it worked in the CHIPS Act. If they wouldn't have subsidized and come up with a 50 billion, nothing would have happened positively for semiconductors. Now they got 4 or 5 new fabs being built and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking about government just placing the money. If you in Portland, Oregon wanted to start a tool and die apprenticeship, and you could pick out the local junior college or whoever to do it. If half the money was a subsidy from the government, they would probably go ahead and do it.
Right.
Without that, I don't think much will gain much on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you see any? Oh, go ahead, Kurt.
I was going to say, going back to what Stephen was saying before, a lot of the big multinationals have been sucking on the government teat for so long. Of course they're waiting, because they're so used to the government kicking out the money that's going to make it easier for them to do what they should be doing in the first place. So yeah, of course, the best way is to, especially if you can inject it into mid-sized companies that are hiring at the ground level, that's exactly where it should be going. But good luck.
Yeah,
Mike,
look,
do you see any political leaders, not to take it too far off, but do you see any political leaders who are talking the same track about how to solve the deindustrialization problem?
Yeah, I see. There's a lot of senators now and representatives that are starting to speak out. And for instance, Tammy Baldwin, who is, I think, from Chicago, isn't she? Isn't she from
think so.
Chicago, a senator?
Yeah, senator
Not
from senator. She's a senator from where is she? Wisconsin, from
Okay.
2013.
She and Marco Rubio and Cassidy from Louisiana. There's 4 or 5 of them that have been really pushing the last several years on both the COOL Act and the De Minimis Act. The COOL Act is the country of origin labeling. If they could get that through, and it's being debated in the Senate right now, they could get that through, it would reduce an enormous number of packages that come in by Amazon every day, like 1 million a day. If they could get the de minimis law through, I think that would reduce the $800 minimum on the internet down to $200 on packages that have to be looked at by the customs people. Right now, China has pushing millions and millions of packages through under this $800 minimum. That's how the fentanyl and all the other stuff is getting in, because none of that stuff goes through customs. So those are 2 things that they're doing. And then there's another committee that is totally focused on Chinese companies and the stock market, and what we mentioned earlier. So I think that there's quite a bit going on. I don't see anything in Congress yet about the training issue. I haven't seen
Yeah.
But there's quite a bit of debate, and I think the Cool Act and de minimis may be debated, and I think there's a good chance they'll pass this year.
I think there's another opportunity when you said earlier about the industrial commons. I think that's a really important point. You can imagine what the industrial commons was in the early days of computing, when HP engineers were in their garages and just they had a community of people coming from Atari even to create these products, to talk with each other, to spend time with each other. And that was the beginnings of Silicon Valley. So the idea of industrial commons, I think, is a really important one, because if we can create those centers of industrial activity and now living in a rural area, I see it this way, is that there are plenty of people in rural areas who would want to participate in the upskilling or the commons environment.
Yeah, the commons is a big deal, and to bring it back to where it was is a big hurdle, but it's what's needed, because it's not just the jobs that left, it's the skills and the knowledge. You go back and think about the millwrights that we used to have millwrights in here who ran all the paper and the lumber mills here in the Northwest. These guys are mostly gone now, but they had tremendous knowledge in those plants. They could build anything in the plant.
Right.
They could rebuild or repair anything. They had these phenomenal, wide-ranging skills. Well, that's pretty much gone now, just with the industry that's gone. But so we need to really focus on the industrial commons. How much can Congress understand what the industrial commons are? Well,
I wouldn't put it on Congress to do that, although maybe they could. But I see that as a grassroots effort of people listening to this podcast to say, what can they do in their communities to create that kind of environment? Going back to the young people that I know of who are in robotics, they're meeting together. They're having just gatherings where they get to try out these technologies. That's the kind of thing that could be restored at a grassroots level.
Yeah, what we have just in the Portland area, when I was in grade school and high school in the 50s, every grade school and high school had a wood shop or a shop, a craft shop.
Mm-hmm.
Then as we got into the 90s, pretty much all of those shops were taken down, and they were replaced by computer classes. So they pulled out all the machinery and put in, everybody started training on computers. So it's going to take, and there's a beginning though in some of the high schools to bring back the shops and to focus on the trades, both auto mechanics, machinists, what have you. It has started, but it's going to take some time to go back and replace all the computer,
Well, or it's an evolution where, because I work in the tech industry. I don't see it going away, but I see it possibly evolving where they're more complementary, where tech companies are finding ways, or tech leaders are finding ways to support local trade, local manufacturing. That would be more altruistic than I would expect, but it would be a nice way to go.
The only way that's happening is because Hal from 2001 is going to be taking over the planet in 3 years, and he's going to just force it that way because he's going to need to build more of himself.
Right.
So, unfortunately, I don't have any faith in our leaders, whether it's government or business. The greed is good from the Michael Douglas 80s is still here.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a problem. And nobody wants to really do anything because they go, if I make you an auto mechanic, or I make you a machinist, or I teach you how to be a plumber or whatever, okay, like how's that benefit me? And they don't look at it like it benefits everybody. It's like they don't think through it. And even today, when you take your car in, you don't really need to be a mechanic. You need to be a computer scientist, right? You plug in the car, You don't have to know anything anymore. You plug it in, the computer tells you everything that's wrong, and you do whatever you need to do, right? So the art of actually doing and thinking is gone away, right? So, and a lot of these things. So if you don't have that, how you can't teach them to do the next step, because you just can't look at something and say, okay, Hal, tell me what's wrong.
Right.
Some of these jobs you actually have to think. Like you have to really think like, okay, I have to do this, then I have to do that. You have to almost play chess or Go, depending on, John won't like Go because it's Chinese.
What we really
but
need
just go to do that.
An authoritarian regime, and if Trump wants to be that authoritarian, okay, if he, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's like when Mr. X's Trudeau was championing or congratulating China. Yeah, that's the direction we definitely do not want.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be very interesting over the next few years to see how this plays itself out, regardless who gets in the White House in 24, 26, whenever it is. And I don't really care at this point. I think it'll be interesting how they take us possibly to the next level. It'll be interesting to see over the next 2 or 3 years how Wall Street deals with it. Like I said, just because Larry Fink says it, I could care less. Goldman Sachs the other day is crying because they're not making as much money. Because why? They can't do the screw around game that they did with the Chinese stocks and this stock. So everyone's feeling it. So they're going to have to come up with a new game. So the new game is either we're going to go back to the 20s and 30s where we build up America again, or they're just going to think of another sleight of hand to the American people. And so, it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
It's a slow process. What we need is maybe, just some rules that incentivize the companies, the educational system. It's a sort of has to be a comprehensive rule making body of rules that channels everybody in the right direction, right? It's not a process that you can change overnight. The Chinese have done this over, let's just say 30, 40 years.
They did it since Nixon. They did it since Nixon shook hands.
All right, so okay. But
if you look at the big picture, this is how I look at the big picture. What we're in is a titanic struggle between all of those companies and associations that want to maintain imports,
right,
and versus people who want to reindustrialize the country, bring back products, build up the industrial commons, build up manufacturing again. It's a titanic struggle. And on the importer side, you've got enormous lobbyings done by Walmart, the big box retailers, Amazon, Target, and the Chinese import lobby. They spend a lot of money and so on. Now, in this struggle, I think they are beginning to lose, and the other side of the struggle is beginning to make some gains. As you all say, it's a slow process, but I think that it is beginning.
Yep. And hopefully it's beginning for the best, not we don't slide back. And once again, regardless of who's president, right? We need to push forward, but we need to push forward positively on a global level, not with, as John just said, an authoritarian regime that makes us, 1939 Germany. And I think that it's a delicate balancing act now and going into the future of how we push forward as a country. That's what's my thought. What do I know? So,
all right. Well, gentlemen, that was a good run. I know that we have Lost and Found.
Ooh, that'll be exciting.
That was a great conversation, Mike. You're welcome to stick around because we've got things.
Or you can disappear, whatever you would like to do. So we do Lost and Found, which is a 5-minute, just funny bit of stupid things that happened this week.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
All right.
Okay, we're going to play the intro. Okay, here we go. Everybody ready?
Ready.
Here we go.
If you like the Lost Dollar Business Club, you should subscribe. If you like it that much, you should also tell a friend of yours. So you should subscribe and like. Also, you should put comments below so we know what you're thinking. Tell us what shows you want to hear. Just help us make it better.
So who's lost $1 this week? And who's found $1 this week?
John, you're always the concerned citizen. What do you have for us?
Well, I mentioned it before, but I think the dollar found for me this week is the guys at UPS that signed a fantastic new labor agreement where at $21 for part-time guys, $49 for full-time, and with benefits they can get close to 200 grand, and I think that's a good dollar win for that workforce that probably hasn't had real good raises for 20, 30 years or something.
Yeah.
So
and they deserve every penny of it.
That's
Working
right.
in the weather and the conditions
they're
that
catching
they do,
up
so.
now,
Yeah.
and so I think that's a big win. Maybe it'll translate into other people.
Nice.
Big
Mr.
win.
Curtin,
Nice.
what do you have for us?
This is an interesting one. Canada's been making its moves in the lithium world, in the battery world. There is a $15 billion EV battery plant being built in Ontario under Stellantis LG Energy Solution. Now, the interesting part about that is when you look at the whole metals game and this area, this sector, there's a company called Albemarle who's in this. Their stock went up. I think it was around their metals went up 800%.
Wow.
So if you look at their numbers in September 2022, they were selling around 2.5. Now they're at 3.39 and climbing again. They've been up a little bit higher just recently, but they're climbing up again. So for investment money, that's a good place to put it.
All right, I'll do two really quick. The first one is the U.S. grocery delivery company Instacart files for an IPO. So that's a dollar found. They're good for them.
Big dollar
That's
found.
a big dollar found. And this one you can take either as a lost or a found, is that Jinping dominates the BRICS summit as leaders endorse Beijing's lead expansion. So the G7 now has somebody else to compete with. So I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but it'll be interesting to see how that's going to go. I don't think the BRICS are going anywhere. So
No,
there you go.
It'll inspire America to greater action.
There you
It'll
go.
inspire America to do something. Probably put their head in the sand and play ostrich. Michael, what do you have for us?
Yeah, well, so there's a new iPad accessory called the Rock Paper Pencil, and it's designed to make drawing on the iPad feel like writing on paper. And as I haven't mentioned this on the show in a while, I've got the Remarkable tablet, the Remarkable 2, and I highly recommend it because people they want the feeling of paper without the hassle of paper. So this is a win for people who appreciate the digital technology, but want that feeling of paper.
Does it work? Because I use my iPad pencil all the time, and I love my iPad pencil. But I've looked at the Remarkable, and it's like there's a Remarkable 2 that came out, and I'm like, it gets like positive and negative reviews. So I'm like, I don't know.
Briefly, I think it's you're somebody you got to be somebody who wants the sleek and simplified interface, who just wants to have an easy way to have multiple notebooks and read PDFs on the go.
As long as I can write on it. I use my iPad all the time because I was going to buy it the last time we spoke, and I read the reviews. I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
So, all right.
We'll sell you the batteries for it.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
But Michael, can it be made here?
Can it be made here? Well,
it's made in China.
One day soon it will be made here. Let's say that.
Well, we're not going to hold our breath.
Well, what we have to do is, we have to charge huge royalties on technology, and don't do any technology transfers, and then we'll at least reap most of the benefits.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Well, gentlemen, it has been a wonderful show. Mr. Collins, it's always a pleasure. I'm sure we'll see you in a few weeks. That seems to be every few weeks you return, which we love. And let me just say this: don't forget to subscribe and like. For you people that started at the Lost Dollar Business Club, and watch the whole thing through. You get this. There are people that just did Lost and Found. Probably want to go back and watch the Lost Dollar Business Club and see the whole interview with Mr. Collins. And that's it. Anything else, guys, or we're good to go?
Let's sign off.
All right, guys. Don't
Sounds
forget to
good.
subscribe and like. Leave your comments below. And if you want to be a guest on the show, feel free. Cheers, everybody.